Obviously, with the Kobe jersey, this is a tough time for a lot of people. Just your reaction when you found out on Sunday.
You know what? It actually kind of felt like a dream. I was home watching games in my bedroom, and my wife was taking a bath, and my son was in the neighborhood, and they yelled at me to, made the announcement through the next room, and I just kind of dumbfounded and, pretty dang shocked. So yeah, it's been a rough day and a half or so.
Have you addressed this with your players? Obviously, I'm sure a lot of these kids grew up idolizing him. They were young at a time when he was at the peak. Is this something that you've talked to the kids about yet?
Well, I think some of the irony lies in the fact that Saturday, my wife and I got an opportunity to meet a family that's from Vegas when we played Kentucky, and we've been involved a little bit with the Coaches versus Cancer, and got an opportunity to meet this family with a little girl named Emily who's 10, and she's got a pretty darn rare form of cancer that's a real battle for her, and so we dedicated our game Saturday. We had her here a couple hours prior to the game and set up a jersey and got a bunch of stuff and made sure our team introduced himself to her and the family prior to the game. We dedicated the game to her and had him in the locker room afterwards. So part of my message, when things get going rough, one of the best things I think about sports is, I don't remember a whole lot of the wins and losses or any stats or technicals or fouls or any of that stuff, but you remember a lot of the people that you're with and the teammates and the coaches, it's a family. And so Saturday prior to the game, Saturday after the game, that was a big part of my message is, let's make sure we're treating each other right. And I actually made the comment that, here we are, about 17 players, 10 coaches, support staff, doctors, everybody. This is a family in this room, and I don't know which one of us is going to leave first, have your number called first. But the message behind it was to let's make sure we're looking out for each other, we're treating each other right, we don't have any regrets. And I'll be danged if, 24 hours later, there's not a prime example of that everybody felt a connection to. So sometimes we get caught up in sports, and I think there's a great responsibility for our coaching staff, athletic director, president, everybody. We all know what our job is, to win games, but we also take it pretty seriously that there's another side to it, and the compassion side, the people side, and making sure we learn how to treat people right and work really hard and know that in the big scheme of things, basketball games and even a career is a really little speck in the whole scheme of things. So it was kind of an eerie weekend that way, thinking about that. So, and we wish Emily well. She's up at the Huntsman Institute getting her treatment, and everybody's praying and pulling for her too. So, yeah.
Larry, what was your interaction with Kobe your last year in the NBA, his rookie year, or maybe even when you were coaching with Milwaukee?
Playing
that last year.
Yeah. Well, I served a couple of 10-day contracts with the Lakers. They were beat up, and I just gotten married. Went on a cruise and had a nice long pre-honeymoon in Key West, and Del Harris was the Laker coach at the time, who I played for in Milwaukee for my whole run, and he's a dear friend. And when they were in, I just sent him a text message out of the blue, and I said, "Hey, I see you got a bunch of your big guys down. If you need to sign somebody on a 10-day," and it was very much a joke. But within an hour, I had a ticket booked, and I was going to try to pass a physical. So I played almost 3 weeks there. I think about 11 games, and a number of those games, obviously, I got the Nip CD that we used to joke that did not play coach's decision on the stat sheet, which didn't involve a bunch of numbers, but it was letters. And I can remember a couple times I was trying to figure out if I validate it, but I'm certain that there were a couple of games in that run for me that there were 2 guys on the Laker roster on that stat sheet that got DNP-CDs, and it was me and Kobe. And a lot of people don't remember that it wasn't all roses for him as a rookie in the league. He played about 16, 17 minutes, had a handful of those DNP-CDs, but you know, and I was trying to hold on, and so I would be one of the first guys to the gym. And I know this is really common. Bill Riley was telling me about it last night, that you try to beat him to the gym. You know how hard he worked. It was him and Larry Bird. Whenever we played the Celtics, I'd always want to get to the gym early. And sure enough, he was down at the other end shooting, and then you'd try to stay in there longer than they would, or get there before they got there, and you couldn't do it. And so it was pretty impressive. He was just a young kid, and I was obviously at the other end of the spectrum. And you know, you don't, when you're part of that, even though my role was very minimal, you still put on a Laker uniform, you know. And I was number 7, and I just remember enjoying that run with those guys and your teammates. And so, you know, short of that, there wasn't a whole lot of interaction. It was kind of a new thing for me, being on a new squad and freshly married. And Del Harris, you know, just said after the fact, he said, "Hey, that's kind of my wedding gift to you." So it was a heck of a gesture, and it gave me an opportunity to be a part of it. But yeah.
How much do you think this is going to be a distraction for your players moving into this week, obviously with an important road trip for you?
I don't think it'll be any distraction. You know, to me, we should be playing for Kobe, and it creates a little bit of an inspiration and a motivation of how quick things can come to an end. And I think he was a great role model for how to play the game. There are a bunch of great quotes that I shared with our team yesterday, and you know, there's a lot of excuse makers out there, and you know, people that are always going to come up with something. At the end of the day, they just didn't work hard enough, and Kobe didn't have a lot of time for those people. He's very focused. And so, you know, in times like these, it should be a great inspiration. You know, and the same thing with those LA kids. They grew up in the heart of it. So I can't picture a distraction being part of it. You know, we're far enough removed from that situation. So I think we're going to be in good shape, and we had a great spirit about us in practice yesterday. Jonathan Ravarino, who's our sports psychologist and very close to our team, addressed our team prior to practice without the coaches there, and he's been very helpful with them and trying to help guys get through it and get their minds right. And then we practiced really hard, and it was fun, maybe one of our better practices. And then I addressed the team afterward. But you know, things like this I don't think are distractions. I think they're galvanizing and kind of bring people together and get you to take a pretty good look at yourself and why we're playing.
You're playing at USC's kind of been one of the surprise teams of the league this year, playing awfully well. Just talk a little bit about them, and also the idea that you're playing, you know, you play these 2 out of, you know, Thursday, Saturday, and now you have one of those, you know, Thursday Sundays. I think 4 of your next 5 road trips are that way, or that way. Just, is there a difference on that, the way you approach games when you have the extra day, and or not? And then just talk about USC.
Well, you know, I think sometimes it gets a little bit goofy when you have maybe an extra day or less day than your opponent. It's happened before. It happened, I think, last year where USC played Colorado on Wednesday, and then we played them on Saturday. We played them here on Saturday, so they had an extra day. When you're on the road, you can have an extra day, which sometimes I think is hard, you know, and that's happened before in the past where you play Thursday night, you play Saturday afternoon, and the team you're playing on Saturday afternoon played Wednesday night at Colorado. But this particular, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is the same rest for each team, so it doesn't really become, you know, too much of a storyline. I think, you know, it gives you it's hard. These Thursday Saturdays are hard. It's one of the rare conferences that packs those, you know, and it's a fine line. You get to the other leagues in the country, and they'll play a midweek game at home and a road game on the weekend, and so you've got 3 days, you know, maybe 4 days between games. So it's a challenge for everybody involved to try to have a quick turnaround with just a single day in between. You know, and I when it's an even playing field and both teams are going through it, you know, I think it's fine. It's gives us one more day to recover, and you know, the same thing with UCLA on Sunday. So I don't think we make a whole lot of it. It's hard to be on the road. It's hard to be nights in the hotel. I think as coaches, we've gone back to trying to have less. We used to have some Wednesday, Sundays, and those were some rough ones where you'd leave campus on Tuesday and you don't come back sometimes till Monday. And when you talk about student athlete and all of that, it comes into play. But I think we're pretty dialed in academically, and we'll be able, with an earlier game on Sunday, although it's Super Bowl, that part I'm probably not fond of, is we'll miss probably half the Super Bowl getting back. But we'll be back in our own bed Sunday night, so it really won't come into play for class or a short week. Well, you know, Jonah Matthews is a guy that's been around a long time in their program. He's a captain for them, and then their big guys, Rakocevic, and we're just saying it O squared because I can't pronounce his name. He probably feels the same about me. But those guys are a load inside. They're an elite rebounding team in our league, shot blocking team. You know, they provide a great post presence for those guys, and then they've got a bunch of, you know, there's capable shooters. There's a couple of really good shooters and athletes. The guys all look like they've spent a little time in the weight room and super athletic. So, you know, not unlike a lot of Pac-12 teams, but they're playing really well. They're 8-1 at home, and have a lot of the key components. There's a reason they're 5-2 in league. You know, they've done really well in league, and it really isn't a surprise to me necessarily, but I think they're anchored a little bit by the big guy, the freshman, that not a lot of people knew maybe was going to be quite this good.
You've made recruiting LA and Southern California a priority for a long time now. You know, not all of the guys have stuck around, but you've effectively recruited that region of California. When you first came here, why was that such a priority, and why does it continue to be now as you're in year 9?
Yeah, well, number one, it's just, you know, population data. There's a heck of a lot of kids that are playing in the state of California, and in particular Southern California, and there's only so many of them that can, you know, go to UCLA and USC if that's their desire. So I think we've been really fortunate with guys. It's quite a lengthy list of guys, and I think kids want to be in the Pac-12. It makes perfectly good sense. There's a little bit of a blueprint when we got here of trying to, you know, Coach Majerus did such a good job, and it was a different conference and different environment, but he always tried to recruit the top Utah kids, which we're trying to do, and have a little international flavor mixed in, which we do. And I think it's important that you know, regionally, California is one of the biggest you know, bases for kids. So it makes a lot of sense. We've had success. I think there's good relationships with ourselves and kids from Southern California. That's a big part of it. You know, a lot of people are tied in. And so if they're not having a good experience when they come to Utah, then it might dry up a little bit. But when things are going well and these young men come to Salt Lake and it goes well, then I think it kind of perpetuates itself a little bit. We're able to keep some momentum going and try to recruit in that neighborhood.
Just to follow that up, not to ask you your itinerary, but you and your staff, you're in that area for 4 days now.
Yeah.
With the 2 middle days, will you maybe try to check in on some things recruiting-wise, maybe a kid who is
Oh, for
committed
sure.
already?
No,
looking in?
there's some tournaments and different games going. So that, you know, in response to Mike's question, that's one of the positive elements, is having that extra day there on a weekend gives us a chance. I mean, you could get back potentially, but you can't have coaches missing games and different things. So it actually sets up pretty well to target some games in the area. That's what we'll be doing.
You've talked about obviously needing to get road wins now, kind of making that progress. Is there anything you can draw from maybe the Kentucky game or Nevada or those types of games where you have won and had success that can pull into that? And how do you kind of get kids to buy into that?
Well, I think it's all about experience, Josh. You know, really, it's they don't buy into it if you haven't experienced it and you haven't done it. And I think we were really dialed in at Nevada. I think we were really dialed in Las Vegas playing Kentucky. We had, you know, I think you play how you train. And, you know, we had a tough stretch. You know, we're 0-3 in the Pac-12 on the road, but not exactly favorable places to try to go get a W. You know, in Colorado, some of it has to do with what happens the week before. You know, Colorado comes off a game that they shouldn't have lost against Oregon State, so you know they're a veteran group and motivated, and we got a really good punch by them, and we didn't respond. And then the same thing happened where Arizona loses 2 games in a row, which they never do, and you get, you know, punched in the mouth by them. So there's certain things we couldn't control. We would have to be really good to beat either one of those teams, and then I think we didn't play a very good game at Arizona State. We played well enough in stretches, so you kind of get what you deserve. You know, and our guys are growing up. I do think you see a lot of our young kids that are garnering a little bit of experience. They remember what that feel good is like. And even though we won 2 games this past weekend, nobody showed up yesterday. You know, we had an edge about us, and our coaching staff made sure that we dictated that. You go on the road, things are hard. You don't get calls in practice this week. There's, you know, you tried to create a little bit of a road environment with some adversity and stir it up a little bit and see who wants to respond. That's, you know, there's some question marks with our lineup of who's playing, who's not playing. We're at the point of the season where it's not a big meeting time where you're going to sit down and have touchy-feely meetings with guys, but, you know, we're inside of 7 weeks, and, you know, your actions are speaking so loud I can't hear what you're saying, kind of thing. So let's, and it was great. It was really a good practice yesterday. So hopefully we can continue to train well this week and then feel good about stepping on the floor on Thursday.
The NCAA tournament's always kind of the standard barrier for everybody and success, but with a young team like this, what do you measure as success as realistic expectations for what this team can achieve?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what we can achieve. I know what we're trying to achieve, and that's certainly getting a ticket to the big dance. You know, there's ways that can happen, and I've said it every year we've been here until somebody tells me we're not going. That's what we believe. And, you know, net number wise, which is a pretty valuable deal, we're you know, 10 spots out of potentially making it. We've got an opportunity to play a number of quad 1 games, you know, this weekend. Thursday is one of those opportunities. So you got to compete, you got to win games, and I think we've done enough in the preseason. I think the conference is strong enough to try to finish in the top 4 or 5 spots and then be able to play our best basketball at the right time of year, which is going down the stretch, you know, and getting hot when we get to Vegas. So I don't have any expectations. I just know that we're working and driving every day in practice. We don't talk about it a whole lot, but we all know what we're trying to do.
Just with the recruiting stuff, Ian Martinez, he's having a pretty nice season. He's a good get for you. Just how optimistic are you about, you know, just the season he's having, and in your mind, you know, the player that he can turn into once he gets here?
Yeah, no, I love Ian. It's been one of the great, you know, families. When we were one of the first teams to offer him. I remember going into a gym. I was actually watching somebody else in L.A. and he caught my attention as a young kid. I think he was a sophomore at the time, and then once we got to know his parents and heard a little bit about their story, I've got a lot of faith in him to have a great career. But I think, you know, that's the nature of recruiting. You're always excited about your recruits, and we're not trying to place any lofty expectations on him. And he's excited to get in here and start working. He's working on his body to get stronger, but he's as an athletic of a player as we've ever had. I mean, when he was on his official visit here, he sat through a bunch of meetings with academic and nutrition and sports scientists, sat and watched us practice for about an hour, and when we were done with practice, he jumped right up and did like a windmill dunk that, you know, right off the bench. And I just, you know, not that that's everything, but I think he's a student of the game, and he's going to be very coachable. And then when you combine that with, you know, an elite athletic set, his future is very bright. I'm fired up about all our recruits, though. I'd hate to leave anybody out. We're really excited about the kids we have coming.
How much of a basketball mind has his father been for your staff and for your current players? Obviously, his basketball history is pretty thorough.
Yeah, no, I think it's a transition for Henry. He's doing a great job, you know, and he's made a great connection with our players, and he's there he's really spending a lot of time on individual workouts. Some of our red shirts, there's a lot of hours behind the scenes, and he's learning. He's paying a lot of attention. He's taking a lot of notes. There's a lot, with joining a new staff, forget the language barrier side of it and the newness of all that. And he's on an active working staff. He's been around basketball the whole time, but there's a lot of this that's new. And I think he's doing a really good job of, you can see he's just sitting back and taking it all in. He's not a guy that needs to, be heard and trying too hard. So I think it's been great. And, I think it's just going to get better. You can see where he, kind of like a player, when somebody has a chance to be a really good player and somebody has a chance as a bright future in coaching, you can kind of see it. And I think he has that.
Larry, who on this current roster has been somewhat of a surprise to you this season, whether it be maybe their commitment to the game or their leadership? Is there someone that's been a pleasant surprise to you?
Well, I think that's a big part of it is and it's broad. It's basketball, it's academics, Jackson Brenchley, Eli Ballstead got 4 points. That's one way you can surprise somebody academically. Our team GPA was a 3.2, which if I'm not mistaken, I talked to Mary Chris in our academic department. I think 1979 or something, there was a quarter or a semester that they had that grade point average. So that's huge. And I think there's a correlation with guys that are taking care of their business in the classroom having a chance to be successful on the court. And, with a lot of the young guys, I'm not surprised. I'm pleased with Timmy and Riley, the leadership role, a couple of our captains. The focus and the communication and helping the young kids along. And then you could, it's all about the next game. So I thought Mickey and Brandon Carlson, Rylan Jones were really good Saturday. But you're only as good as your next game, so we don't really pat too many people on the back. I think guys get recognized, but they know it's a grind. And I'm hopeful we can talk about this question in 7 weeks when we really have some guys that are stepping up at the right time so we can do what you're talking about and making it to the NCAA tournament. But I'm pleased with everybody's work effort, work ethic. And I think it's been a little bit of a roller coaster with some guys. It's hard being a freshman. So some guys look like a deer in the headlights just before Christmas, and the Christmas break was good for them, and now everybody's kind of getting their sea legs again. So the season can be a little bit of a roller coaster ride, and what we're asking is for guys to be consistent.
Absolutely. And then on Saturday, Brandon Carlson, after the game, had talked about Timmy Allen sending out like a group text message to everyone, just cheering them on when you guys were going through kind of that stretch of that loss streak. And Brandon did say that Timmy has been kind of the glue of this team.
Yep.
What has been, in your opinion, from freshman year to now just sophomore year, Timmy's biggest growth?
Well, you asked that question, I'm actually getting goosebumps because that's a big part of this, and he cares. And I've told him this a number of times. When you have a group of guys, coaches really care, at least our staff really cares about trying to do things the right way and getting the most out of our guys. And sometimes you coach players that you can tell they don't care as much, and that's hard to try to motivate people. But Timmy, I've always said, you've kind of got an opportunity in a special team when you have some players that care as much as you do. And you can see that with him, and those kind of actions where you're keeping guys together when things aren't always going well. It's easy to be that guy when things are rolling. But he's been so consistent with bringing his effort and attention to detail. He's got areas he needs to get better into, and he knows it, as do all our guys. And he's kind of been thrust in this a little earlier timeline than a lot of guys. It's not easy. I could ask everybody in our room, hey, who wants to be a captain? And there's a lot of guys that would throw their hand up in the air, and then when they find out how hard it is, if you really want to be that captain, some of the guys might tap out. And so usually by the time you're a junior and a senior, I think you're mature enough to comprehend that. But we've not only have we thrust him in that role, but I think he's really relished it. And he's always been a little bit more mature, has gone through some adversity in his life, and has hit in some of those boundaries and different things that have set him back, and he just keeps coming back stronger. Some guys haven't done that yet, so I think he's a little bit more prepared for it, knowing that it's going to be hard. If I could just, here's one of the things. I've gotten so many texts on the Kobe front about, hey, hug your kids, and one of the things about these types of situations, last time I felt like this was like 9/11, where it just hits you in the gut. And I know that at that same time, what happened was our country was kind of brought together. And politically, religiously, there was just a lot of feel good, and everybody was really compassionate toward one another. And then, unfortunately, it takes things like this, where you kind of open your eyes and you sit back and you go, you know what? It brings everybody together. And I think you never want somebody to leave too early, but Kobe was always motivational and inspirational, and he loved to tell stories. And my sense is that this could actually, this tragedy, not just he, but, his daughter and the other people involved, could bring everybody together. And I just read something on the internet that was pretty good. Before you speak, or now in this society, instead of speaking it sometimes before you hit send or type, is what you're saying, that filter that I know you guys have all seen, is it kind? Is it necessary? And is it true? And so that, for me, I've been through enough stuff. I think a lot of people have, but it's just a little reminder of how quick things can change. And hopefully this is something that brings everybody together, not just in the sports world, but, some of the craziness going on. So I do think the world can be a better place. I got a text from a friend that said the world is not going to be the same without Kobe. And it got me thinking, like, well, maybe the world can be a better place without Kobe, unfortunately, if we all approach it the right way. So anyway, that's my message for the day. Okay. I think they are. I might try to catch up with